So the very first time when Dad and I got back, and this is after we'd handicapped, so who knew what was going to happen because we didn't know. He gave me $6. I won $42. I don't know what he bet, God knows. He cleared over 300. This was the first time that we actually handicapped, remember, and we read the handicapping book. And so as Dad said later, years later, it was maybe a good thing that we won or maybe not. Who knows? So we told Mom that we won. Dad won the 300, I won the 42. And so Mom put her hand out like that and said, okay, boys, give Mama some. So and we always did. Then my Dad, I never won that much, but Dad, when he won the big chunk, he'd give her some. And then Mom said, where are we going to dinner? And we'd usually go to Diamond Steakhouse, which was a really nice steakhouse in Chicago. Great T-bones and filet mignon was my mom's steak. And that was wonderful. It was a tremendous steakhouse in Chicago. We also went to a couple Italian places. And then, as Dad always said, when we win like 50, it was A&W or Dog and Suds. A&W, which is still around, here in Seattle even. They're all over the place. A&W, you drive up, and it costs right now. It probably costs you $5 or $6 a person. So that happened too. But Arlington Park back in the day, Arlington Park back in Chicago down in the summertime, in the 60s anyway. You had it was a wonderful time to play the ponies because you had the Mid-American Triple Crown. In the Mid-American Triple Crown back then, for some reason, we were just so lucky because we had 4 years in a row when I was in high school that one horse won all three. But it just so happened that those horses that won were tremendous. I mean, they were Northern Dancer, who was one of the greatest studs probably in history, much like Seattle Slew. A tremendous stud that he passed his progeny on, and his daughters and sons passed their progeny on. And so Northern Dancer, one of the greatest studs in the history of racing. And Dad and I got to see him win all three Mid-American Triple Crown races. This is after the Triple Crown. And then Buck Passer, my favorite racehorse was Buck Passer. And Buck Passer won all three. And Buck Passer was very unique. He had a thing that basically what most people called it was he had a strong herd instinct. Some people call it second-itis, but it was herd instinct. And what happens is some thoroughbreds, they don't want to pass or get away from the herd. It's like a flock of birds, and it's like a school of fish. There's safety in numbers. Well, thoroughbreds, or horses rather, Mustangs, even today, horses, if they're stay in a herd, the cougars and the mountain lions, they don't know who to jump on. Because if they jump on one of the horses and they fall off, they get trampled. So the herd instinct is still strong instinctively in horses. And so, but when that happens, horses, they don't really want to get away from the herd. Well, the herd is the race itself. All the horses in the race. And so Buck Passer, if you ever get a chance to look at his record, but he did win 15 in a row, including three of those races in the Mid-American Triple Crown back in, I think it was, I'm going to say 63 or 64. I think so, one of those 2 years. But he never won by more than like a half a length. Quite often he'd win by a nose, a head, a neck, a length. And Brawley Baeza, the jock, said, I'd have to time it just right. And they called him Chili in the seat, because he would have to just time it right. He'd have to wait and wait and wait, because quite often, sometimes what he did in the past, he would get ahead too early in the stretch, and then horses would catch him. And so that didn't work, obviously. And so he learned to just time it right. But he won 15 in a row, which is a tremendous thing. But Buck Passer also, when he came on the track, he did a thing where he would stop, and he'd look at the crowd, and he'd look out, and he'd kind of just stand there. And Brawley Baeza, the jockey, said, well, that's Bucky. We just have to wait for him. And eventually he'd go out and warm up. And also when he was in the paddock, he'd walk around and stop and look at people. And one time, in the 3 races when he was at Arlington Park for the $100,000 races, he stopped and looked at Dad and I. And Dad and I, it was like Hey, the Murphys are here. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. I'm not going to pay much, but bet on me anyway. What the heck? And then he'd keep going. And it was always 85, 90 degrees in the summer in Chicago. He never, not a drop of sweat on this horse. He was just cool as the other side of the pillow, as Stuart Scott always said from ESPN, God love him. But doggone it, Arlington Park back then was tremendous because Tom Rolfe, Roman Brother was another horse, Dr. Fager won all three. It was a tremendous run, old Arlington Park. This is before that one burned down, and I've never been to the new one, but it was just tremendous. So the one thing I did want to talk about ever so briefly today, to finish up, is a little bit on pace makes the race. And then I'm going to talk about this next time, but what I wanted to talk about is when I was a kid, and you probably have been through something very similar. When I was a kid, I was with my friends, and you want to run somewhere, and when you're like little, and somebody'd say, well, let's race to blank. In my case, it was the Little Store, this store that had the 12-ounce Cokes, because I'm 73, so back then 12-ounce Cokes were, I think, a dime. They had actual penny candy. Can you imagine? That's so old I am. Penny candy, oh my God. And they sold baseball cards, comic books, that kind of thing. And this older couple, they lived in the little building, and they called it the Little Store. And that's the name that they had up on the billboard, Little Store. That was the name of the place. Very creative. But they'd been there forever. And somebody'd say, wherever we were after we played baseball or when we got out of school or whatever, let's race to the Little Store. And the person that came in last had to buy everybody a penny candy. So, I mean, there'd be 5 or 6 of us, so it'd be 6 cents or a nickel or something. And I came in last a lot because I run slower than snails, and I just run, I'm slow, I run awful. But I learned that if I run slow early, that I can usually pass people that run fast early. That's pace. Pace is if you run fast early in the race, like if two or three thoroughbreds hook up and go too fast, then the horses that are back there just sitting and waiting, later in the race, there's a good chance they'll be able to pass them. Well, I want you to think about that between now and the next time we talk, because that's pace. There's an axiom in racing called pace makes the race. And if you understand pace, you will have a very good chance of being at least 50% towards the opportunity of picking the winner at the track. Good racing to you, good talking to you, and we'll see you next time.